I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. This case came across my timeline. I saw that the trial was happening. I did not realize the history of this case, and the jury never found out about the death of Tracy Nix's other grandchild, which occurred while the child was in her custody as well. So, in less than a year, there were two children that died in her care. Now, their deaths were under different circumstances. And I want us to remember that the families have access to this information. The first trial, I'm sorry, no, the first death was not charged, so she was never charged with, a crime in that first death, and the mother of both of those children, she really wants the prosecutor to take a look at that first death as well. It's my understanding that there may be a law in Florida about kids that die in water, and there is no um and it's an accident, and I think that might be because of how many pools, how many bodies of water are in Florida. It sounds like there are some laws that may have restricted the first charge being prosecuted. Y'all remember, I'm not a lawyer. I talk about this from a psychological perspective, and when talking about this case, I also want to talk about forgotten baby syndrome, because this is something that happens, and there was an expert that did not come into the trial. It sounds like there may have been a deposition, 'cause it seemed like Court TV had some footage of some of what he may have testified to, and I think he's an expert in the field where he's often called, and he'll assess a defendant that is charged in a hot car death, because unfortunately, it is true that anyone can, and so I just wanna say it, people have to be careful, because anyone can leave a baby in a car, and there are things that we have to be mindful of. There are new laws that are coming into place, and he mentioned that during his interview with Court TV. So I have a link to his interview that he did with Court TV down in my description as well. We are not going to watch all of his interview. I do have some of his research and some of his papers that he's talked about. And so I do want to dive into that a little bit deeper. Because I do this live, I want to come on over to the chat. There's a trigger warning for this. This involves the death of two children. And so welcome Lisa, welcome Jenny's Wonderland. Hey Phoenix, it's been a minute. Hey Cindy. Um this case is, and my heart breaks for the mother and father of Uriel and Ezra. Those were the two children that passed while they were in their grandmother's custody. So here is, I believe, so on the right, I believe is Ezra, and then on the left is Uriel. And all right. So I'm just finishing. Hey, witness, welcome, welcome. And then question: can someone explain how this phenomenon didn't start happening until recently? So it's not something. So this is something that's happened throughout history. There have been over, and we're going to get to some of that research a little bit later. So this isn't something that's new. Unfortunately, there are about 35 car deaths, I wanna say, a year, children that die in cars, and normally it is an unexpected, a caregiver that just forgot that the baby was in the car, and so I really, really just hope that, the family, because I cannot imagine the mom, the mother and father that are grieving at this time. And it was the maternal grandmother. So Tracy is the mother of the children. So Kayla, I want to say her name is Kayla. All right. So, with this case, let me just dive into some of the specifics. So, Ezra was, I want to say he was 9 months old. I want to say Ezra was 9 months old, December 22nd of 2021. Tracy fell asleep and her husband went to run errands, and that's where my question is, did and the baby somehow was able to, oh, he was 15 months. He wasn't 9 months. I apologize. Ezra was 15 months old. He was able to reach a door and went outside, crawled under a fence, and unfortunately, he was found deceased in a pond. And so this was just like, there were no child locks on the doors, and so this occurred December 22nd of 2021. Then we get to November 1st, 2022. It's my understanding that the mother of the children, Kayla, she had an unexpected hair appointment, and normally, because she did not have complete trust in her mom. And we are going to watch a portion of her interview because she wanted, this was her mom, and she's going to say the child in her wanted to forgive her mom, and her daughter was only 9 months old. And so it's like, okay, well, this child, isn't mobile enough to escape and crawl out. And so the mother, so Tracy agreed to watch the baby, and Tracy went out to lunch with her friends with the baby, and then she drove her car, and I think the, Uriel was in the was behind the driver's seat. So sometimes what can be helpful to prevent things like this is to put the child on the passenger side, because when you look back, you can see the baby easier. In my car, I had, like, the child mirror, and so my mom watched when my kiddo was from 6 months until about 18 months. My mom watched our child, and I provided her with all of the child safety stuff because she was our daycare, and so because our child would be spending a lot of time with her, I also would regularly text my mom, and no lie, I wish my mom was in the chat today. I would ask my mom for proof of life, and I would just text her to be like, "Send me a picture of my baby." And so whenever I would ask for that picture, she would send me a picture of whatever our kiddo was doing. My mom and I also did a CPR class together because I knew my mom was going to be in a primary caregiving role. Choking is something that's really common. So things like grapes and hot dogs. So what I learned in the CPR class is that grapes should be sliced. Even our kiddo's daycare, once he did go to daycare from 18 months to about 5 years old, right before going to kindergarten, daycare, we had to cut the grapes in half. Daycare, I got a note from school because I sent, because he was like 4. I was like, he's fine. Daycare was like, nope, that's a choking hazard. Make sure that you slice the grapes in half, because unfortunately, anything that's a circle can get lodged in the child's throat. And so I was just super cautious, and and I was really concerned, so I was the one that always dropped our child off at daycare. If for some reason, if my husband had dropped our kiddo off at daycare, I probably would have just texted him just to make sure, like, "Hey, how was drop off? How did drop off go?" Because sometimes when the person that isn't the primary caregiver, or the person that isn't, that if there's a change in routine where all of a sudden I have a doctor's appointment in the morning and my husband has to drop off our kiddo, that his body and mind might automatically just drive to work. And that is something that has happened time after time, where unfortunately somebody, they they forgot. And and as a society, it's hard to think about, like, how can you forget about a baby? And that's even what Tracy said in her 911 call. I think it's in one of the calls, because they played the audio. I don't know if it was the interview or if it was from one of the calls, but she said, who forgets a baby? And unfortunately, Uriel was in the back seat in Florida, 90-degree weather for 3 hours and died. It's my understanding, died of heat stroke and temperatures in a car. And Florida has a law that you can't leave a child in a car unattended for longer than 15 minutes. She was not found guilty of aggravated manslaughter. She was found guilty of a third-degree felony, according to Court TV, a third-degree felony, which was leaving a child unattended in a car for longer than 15 minutes. That was all that the jury convicted her of. Now, the jury was not aware of the death of Ezra. And the jury also wasn't aware that Tracy was on high doses of Ambien and benzodiazepines, and Ambien can cause issues with memory. Now, I don't know that the Ambien was necessarily what caused, and it was a doctor. Let me look up his name, Dr. Diamond, Dr. David Diamond, assessed her, and he was concerned that the combination of Ambien, benzodiazepines, and also forgotten baby syndrome, that might have played a role. And none of this is to excuse anything, because like none of this is to excuse it. I like bringing education to these conversations, and I like sharing tips and tools of what people can do to help make sure that this does not happen. Because sometimes, because there's been a lot of comments that I've seen on some of the videos about her, calling her all types of, and I don't know her personally. So her daughter has never said that she was a bad mom or that she was neglectful as a parent. I believe she was a retired principal, and so it doesn't look like there was any other, but 2 children died in her care, and that is a fact, and that is something that she will have to live with for the rest of her life. And so, yes, the first child was 15 months old and was able to, it's my understanding that the reach for the door was like 34 inches to get to the latch. It was one of those latch down doors. The reach was 34 inches, and the maximum reach just so happened to be 36 inches. Somehow the child opened the door, wandered outside. It's my understanding that the grandfather had taken him to the pond before to look at the ducks, and so that might have been some of the motivation for him getting out. And I definitely get how people, if I was on the jury, I don't know what I would have done. If and and the judge kept the ambient information out, so the jury was not aware that she was on a medication that could possibly impact memory, and the jury also wasn't aware that another child had died in her care. And so, and the details of that, it's my understanding that while she was doing CPR, it just took some time for her to call 911. She was probably, but it was, and then that there is, because what triggered her memory to remember that Uriel was in the back seat was when her grandson came, an older grandson came over. It's my understanding that that individual is a teenager now, and that he came over to the house, and that's when she realized she remembered Uriel. And so this really is a heartbreaking situation. Um, and okay, so let's go on ahead and dive into Kayla's interview, okay? Because and she's done multiple interviews. We are going to watch a little bit of this one. I'm trying to make this top part go away and also make sure that we are at 100%. Let's see. Yep, we're at one time speed. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate you all being here. Let's go on ahead and dive into this. I also have the link to this full interview down in the description as well.
I was relieved to hear that there was going to be accountability and ownership and a conclusion to this part of this story. One of the things that we have struggled with through this whole case has been the exclusion of my other story, which is my son that drowned in her care. And so for us, this is a win for Yuri. But I have a son named Ezra, and he has not been spoken of. And he died in her care. And I don't have any accountability or any answers for that. And I continue to look for those answers to what happened in that case and why that case was not worthy of prosecution at that time. So we're going to be going back in with the state and having a few more conversations to see. But in this moment, we are relieved. The daughter and me had a very hard time with her being taken, and I ended up stepping aside for that moment. And it isn't something that I would ever call a win for me. It is a win.
And I think she's saying, I guess, like when her mom was taken back into custody or something. And so this is a complex, complicated situation because this is a daughter that probably loves her mom, but then also understands two of her children died in her mother's care. And so this is a very, very complex situation. And child loss, child grief is a whole other type of grief. When people I know, when they have lost a child or when clients I work with are coping, managing, surviving a child's death, that grief just hits different. And often the parent can feel a lot of guilt just in general. And there can just be a lot of emotions that come up.
And for justice for my daughter. And we are grateful to the jurors that spent their time, to all the experts, to all the police and EMTs and every person that played a hand in this trial. We are truly grateful for your consideration and your time and the energy you guys have spent, as well as you guys from the media. I'm truly grateful for giving my story a voice and giving our kids a chance for the world to see that they were incredibly wanted and loved and valued to us. I was deeply saddened when my sister had to testify. This trial process has been complicated, but it broke my heart to see her and to have it brought back to memory that there was personal events in their life that day that she had damaged in her world as well. And I adore my son or my nephew, Aiden. And I hate so deeply that he's traumatized by this, including the court process, including all of this, because he's a teenager. And I think that I struggled the most with her testimony and also just listening to the recording of my mom, I think, go on a long time about where she was going,
and the fact
what was she going to do, and never hearing, oh my God, Yuri, oh my God, my granddaughter, where's my granddaughter, what happened to her?
It was her keeping the information from us instead of telling us. That was upsetting.
And we are happy ultimately with what the state provided for us in terms of this case with Ezra or with Yuri. And I continue to look for a way to address my son Ezra's issue because it's something I feel worthy of attention.
For it being not guilty, it does sting. I'm thankful though that we did get something. I didn't want to walk out of there and see her walk away like she's been for the past 2 years and just being out and about. I was glad to see that the jury did see our side of it, even though they didn't push for the maximum sentence. It was still, like I said, a form of justice.
Well, and as her daughter, I've struggled the whole time with understanding why there couldn't just be that ownership and what did happen. Like, why did we do this? The destruction that has come from this process is pretty unfathomable as well. You know, my kids are dead, but I've lost a lot more than that.
My son's lost a brother. My son's lost a sister. Absolutely. You know what I mean? We look at it from that perspective, and it's,
we advocate for our children.
Yeah.
Talking with the assistant state attorney, was there any indication on what she was found guilty on and how much time she would potentially be looking at for a sentence?
He was saying the maximum for the conviction that she had was 5 years. But he was very unsure whether or not they were going to arrest her
Go
there.
into further details and all of the it kind of played out in front of us.
And the judge will be aware of the death of the other child, but the jury was not.
The thing
Didn't
is,
have much time to take
the
that in.
judge knew of my son's story. You know what I mean? The judge was very familiar with it, and I think that had to play in it. Even though the jury didn't know, the judge was very familiar with it. And so
well, her defense was prepared to shut down a case considering or containing Ezra, which is why they had so many hearings, and ultimately he was excluded from this trial.
We got our son Asher, and we just had a newborn. She is fixing to be 5 months old now, and so we focus on those, and we focus on building. We are always going to be thinking of our children, but I can't neglect my son that I have, and I'm not going to hurt them. It's a day at a time, in a sense.
And when it comes to my family, I mean, that is complicated. In this process, due to certain circumstances, I was already pretty well distanced from them. There are some family members I haven't spoken to in years, and that breaks my heart, and I would want nothing more for that to be different. But the damage has been felt in that way greatly, and I don't know how we recover. I want that. I want us to have a family. But right now it seems very complicated.
All right. And I'm just looking at the chat and I see that there's mixed emotions. This also, not that 2 years is, if this trial had happened in 2023, I don't know if we would see more emotion. And after already losing one child and then losing a second child, um, and I think they were at least happy that they got that there was some form of accountability in the second case. And I do just want to point out that the two situations were very different. That Ezra was 15 months old, and it was a case where because of that, that because there weren't safety locks, that was how Ezra got out. I could see, because if the first one had been a hot car death, if the first one had been that type of situation, I think the parents would have made a different decision. And like I said, none of this is to blame, accuse. It just kind of helps me understand. And I've seen different people analyze it. And somebody mentioned, so Ambien is a sleep aid, and that's taken at night. It's not taken during the day. But even taken, so if you Google side effects for Ambien, one of the side effects are potential memory loss. But to me, if my mom is sick, and if I ask her, "Hey, can you watch my kiddo?" And my mom might say like, "Hey, I've been forgetting like where my phone is. Like I've been struggling. I don't think now is a good time or if I'm around my mom and I realize, wait a minute, she doesn't seem like she's the way that she was. I tend to be very vigilant with my child, and that's just because of the work I do. So I can count on one hand the number of people that weren't a licensed daycare or at school, so a teacher. I can count on one hand the number of people that I've let watch my child, and I don't blindly trust my child's teacher. So there are children that have died in daycares because the daycare provider left the child in a car seat all day. Or there was a situation in Virginia where a child was in like a small closet, and I think it ended up being, but like, so there are situations that have happened at other places. But I was super nervous when my kiddo went to daycare. Mostly it was a lack of control because I could text my mom at any moment and be like, proof of life, like send me a picture of my kid. The daycare I chose, they had windows, so the rooms had supervision, so I could walk into the daycare and I could just look from the door or I could look from the window and see what my child was doing. I also think that having an open concept like a window or cameras, that the teachers are also more careful versus being in a closed room or a closed door where the director can't just be walking around and see what's happening. The daycare I chose didn't have cameras, but they did have that kind of open concept. And so um I just I am very vigilant. My kiddo probably won't do sleepovers at other people's now he can do a sleepover here. So if I meet the parents, if the parents are okay with their child sleeping over, we would probably have them sleep down in I don't know, like I would have to figure that part out. Think my kiddo tends to keep to himself a little. He likes his space, he likes his house. And so I don't even know that he would want to do a sleepover. Now he would want to meet up at Sky Zone or meet up at, some, do something fun, but at the end of the night, he wants to go home. He wants to sleep in his bed. And so we'll see if that's ever possible. A lot of people blame the moms in these situations. And um I wasn't on the jury, and, um, the jury came to their decision based on the evidence. I respect the jury's decision. Um, in watching this case on appeal, because the things that were kept out, specifically, because I think they kept out the Ambien, the medication as part of the defense, that could potentially come up on appeal, but we will see. And so, all right. So let me go on ahead and share this, and I do have resources down in the description that talk about, preventing um, forgotten baby syndrome. And so this is a article by Dr. David Diamond. He is this is for the Department of Pharmacology. Um, Let me share, because which video? I think it's um, because there was one doctor on Court TV that analyzed Tracy Nix's mental state, and she was the one that brought up forgotten baby syndrome. I also did watch Dr. Grande's video on this as well, and he brought up forgotten baby syndrome. But I'm just going to share a picture. So let's share this one. So this is the Court TV video. Was Tracy Nix's forgetfulness caused by medication? And this is Dr. David Diamond, and they had him on for an interview. So he evaluated Tracy Nix, and looks like he was also involved in another case too. All right. So let's get to this part. So um, so without evidence of other harm of children, because parents that have a history of being neglectful or harmful to their children, that's a different case according to his research and according to him. If there's a history of substance abuse or organic brain dysfunction, because I was getting in the comments, could there have been dementia? So I did get that in the comments quite a bit. And Lisa, I saw your comment about that specific case, and so I cover 2 cases a week. So I try to pick which cases we can kind of we can kind of learn something from. I have covered cases of teachers that have been inappropriate, and so we will see. So she was found guilty of, in Florida, they have a crime of leaving a child in the car for longer than 15 minutes. So it wasn't called like felony child, but it's a third degree felony, and it was leaving a child in a car for longer than 15 minutes. That was what she was found guilty of. All right. All right. And so a survey of 1,000 parents was conducted and in 2014, and 25% of parents with children under the age of 3 reported that at some time during their drive, they had lost consciousness of their child being in the car with them. So they had forgotten that their child was in the car with them. Um, I use GPS. My routine was driving my kiddo to daycare, and then from daycare, I would go to the office. After the office, I would go pick up my kiddo from daycare. On Wednesdays, my mom would pick him up, and so I would pick him up from her house on Wednesdays. But GPS just helps me stay on track. Today, I had a doctor's appointment, and the way I go and the way I need to go to the doctor, it was different than how I go to the office. And so I had to consciously think, because when I get in the car in the morning, my brain automatically on a Tuesday, my brain wants to drive to work. And so, all right. Research indicates that children have been forgotten in cars by non parental caregivers and mothers and fathers at all levels of socioeconomic status and education, including well educated and highly responsible people such as physicians, teachers, news reporters, judges, prosecutors, so all of those different professions. Children dying in hot cars has been discussed in media, and there's a link to an article. I also have the link to this down in the description. And so this doctor began studying forgotten children in cars in 2004, and over 100 children had already died after being left in cars. Since that time, over 200 more children have died or suffered brain damage from heat stroke after being forgotten in hot cars. And he is a behavioral neuroscientist, and he looks at this from a neurobiological and cognitive perspective and develops conclusions based on this. And so his hypothesis, what he says, is that the driver loses awareness of a presence of a child in the car. Often the child becomes quiet, or there's nothing to remind the person that the child is in the car. The driver exhibits a failure of the brain's perspective memory system, and intervening events during the drive, including stressors, strong distractions, may contribute to the cause of that being able to remember that. And all of that just goes to say, and his big hypothesis, his big thing is that this could happen to anyone. Something that I personally did is I would look so I could check my kiddo in the car. So when he was rear facing, I had one of those mirrors where I could see him. So if I'm driving, that I could see him when he was in the back seat. I did normally keep him on the passenger side. Now that my kiddo is 7, and if I'm and so I do keep him behind my driver's seat. When he's in my husband's car, he's normally on the passenger side, but it's just easier if I'm driving by myself. If he's behind the passenger seat, that's that nice reminder. I would normally keep the diaper bag in the front seat. So I think in this case, there was nothing that reminded her that her grandchild was in the back seat. Dr. David Diamond, he recommends keeping a stuffed animal in the car seat, and then when the child is in the car seat, put the stuffed animal in the front seat as that kind of visual reminder. Some people will say put your phone in the back seat, or put your purse in the back seat, or keep something that reminds you that the baby is in the car. And that newer cars, so there is legislation, because this is an issue and it's a safety issue. There is new cars will have child detection technology similar to that reminder to put on your seatbelt. I'm guessing it'll be some type, if there's a sense of weight in the car, that there will be a that there the car will beep or something to remind the individual, oh, like, don't forget the baby. And so that's where we are. um What I did was just keeping the diaper bag in the front seat, or I would visually look. So I would every so often I would just look up and check my kiddo. All right. Ah, your SUV has that. That's super cool. That is super cool. Let me check vehicles with child detection, child presence detection. So that is something. So some cars have child presence detection, CPD symptoms, that use sensors to detect if a child is left in a car. If a child is detected, the system can alert the driver or other people nearby. So the Toyota Sonata, and this is not sponsored, okay? Like I'm just a prototype system called Cabin Awareness is being tested in the Toyota Sonata. VitaSense is another radar alarm system that can detect vital signs of sleeping newborns. If an unattended child is detected, the car's alarm system and communication systems will alert the cars nearby. So, all right, that is super cool. All right. Um, all right, so I have that there. Let me go on ahead and just share some of the other resources that I have down in the description. So there have been over 1,000 uh, child hot car deaths since 1998, and that's where I mentioned about 37 children a year die from heat stroke, either because they were left or become trapped in a car, and about 52% of those deaths was because somebody had forgot that the child was in the car. Some of those might have been somebody that maybe that thought the child would be okay and left the child in the car, and so it wasn't a case of forgetting the child, which is extremely sad, and yes, that should not happen. All righty. 47% of the time when a child is forgotten, the caregiver meant to drop the child off at daycare or preschool. Thursdays and Fridays, the end of the work week, have the highest deaths. More than half the deaths, 55%, are children under the age of 2. And so a tip, check the back seat. Once you park, stop, look, lock. And so everyone should keep their car locked. Okay. And so there are just some tips. Never leave a child alone in a car. If you see a child alone in the car, call 911. Like visually check, see if the child is okay. It is illegal in I think all the states, because it's considered neglect to leave a child alone in a car. And I was so nervous about this. So y'all know the work I do. So because sometimes I would go to, so we have Wawa, that's a gas station, like 7-Eleven or something like that. So I would go to Wawa and I'd want to get a coffee or something, and I'm glad that gas stations like Sheetz, they have a drive-through, because maybe I just wanted coffee or I just wanted to go in and grab something real quick. I would always take my kiddo in with me. Like I would never, because of the work I do, if I had a complaint to CPS, like it's a really big, and also you don't want to leave. Okay, also you don't want to do crimes. You don't want to leave children in cars, but also like I didn't want to leave my child unattended for any point, like I didn't want a like CPS complaint. So even if I was just running into Wawa real quick, I would always make sure to check on that. In the 80s and 90s, Lisa, this was true. There would be a commercial that says, "Do you know where your kids are?" Because it was a different time. Um yeah. But I do still think car deaths happened. I do still think these things happened. I think we have started to track these things more. Just don't do crime. Just please don't do crimes. Okay. All right. And because I think there can be this false narrative that bad people leave kids in cars, or that somebody that has a problem, because that's where people were looking, what mental health condition could Tracy have to point to why this situation happened, when sadly a hot car death could happen to, but 2 kids dying, that gets a bit, ugh. So I didn't do a psychological evaluation on her. I do not know. It sounded like the, Dr. David Diamond, who did assess her, said that once she stopped the Ambien, that it seemed like her memory, it seemed like she improved, but he was gonna be an expert for the defense. They also in the court TV interview, I was a little sad, they did not bring up the other child. They did not bring up Ezra. So the first death never came up in the court TV interview with Dr. David. And so, all right. Yes. And so, yes, in the United States because, yeah, don't I yeah, so let's Lisa, I was sensing that too. There it seemed like in Kayla's interview, Kayla is the mother of the children with her husband. It seemed like there were some family dynamics, and I saw another interview with her where she mentioned, cutting off her mom and not talking with her mom. And I am interested to see at sentencing what is said. If there are any, public impact statements that are given, I am interested to see all of that because yes, I think that'll be interesting, but let me know if y'all have any questions. Thank you all for recommending this case. This was complicated. I try to be careful when I cover triggering cases because there are like it is it is hard. And if I ran into the gas station, if I ran into Wawa for 2 minutes, like, it would but I guess I was super vigilant, like, maybe hyper vigilant. I was just because of the work I do, I was just like, it's just easier for me to just take him in with me real quick while I go and grab coffee. Or do I just go through the drive-through at Starbucks or something? And so yeah. And I definitely did not recommend, so I think I said to call the police, call EMS. You can notify the store because sometimes the store will do an announcement. If the child is unconscious, sometimes, they will, yeah, that's where you just wanna make sure the police are gonna get there quickly, and so, yes, because I also wouldn't wanna be liable for, like, yeah, but, yeah, it's a whole thing. Um, and and my understanding of what happened on the day of Uriel's death, it sounds like it was an unexpected, like, the grandmother wasn't watching her children regularly and was just like, okay, let me just trust her. I don't have any other options." I'm sure Kayla is wishing that she canceled that hair appointment or she paid the late cancellation fee. I encourage people to trust their gut. Because sometimes your gut is telling you, "Mm, don't do it. I kn something's not quite right." And if you get that gut instinct, please trust yourself because Kayla said the daughter in her wanted to forgive. She wanted to be able to let grandma see the baby, but, I can't imagine the grief. I can't imagine just the guilt. I can't imagine, what she's going through, and I'm not in her shoes. And if I were in her shoes, what I can say what I would do. So I personally, if if my child had died in someone's care, they would not be an option for me, but I have the privilege of, like, so I would say that for me, I don't hold anything against somebody that, like, if that was the decision that somebody else made, I'm sure that she regrets it. I'm sure that she, feels I just don't have the words for how she could feel, and the jury did find Tracy guilty. She is facing It's my understanding she's facing up to possibly 8 years. I've heard 8 years. They said 5 in that interview. The judge, I'm guessing she may get, like, 3. I don't know that she'll get the full that she'll get. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But my guess would be probably closer to 3 years. We will see. Alright. Yes. Thank you for realizing why the mom would still work with or use grandma for care. And I think and yes, childcare, especially like unexpected, because if let's say she's a stay-at-home mom or something, like if an unexpected, oh my gosh, I need somebody to watch my child. Um, yeah, that's just that is and so witness for me, the gut instinct is my brain telling me something is wrong. I might not know why, but it's best to follow that instinct. I agree. Trust your gut. I agree. I agree. And Jesse, because I mentioned earlier in the broadcast that my mom watched my kiddo until he was 18 months, and I paid her pennies, okay? Because I don't even want to count how much more expensive daycare was once I had daycare. Um, and I have the privilege, so when I went to my doctor's appointment this morning, my kid is home from school. So, I'm thankful that my husband was able to be home and all of that, and so, it is hard. Um, wow. So I missed her testimony. So Kayla testified that she typically took Yuri with her everywhere, including her hair appointments. Wow. My my heart breaks for their family, and, the one thing I wanted to do in memory of Uriel and Ezra is to just talk about how people can prevent and to not get so, I don't know, like, like, I would never do this, that people don't put certain precautions in place because anyone can unfortunately lose track, especially it's normally the child falls asleep. So a child that's screaming and yelling, that's their noise is going to be your reminder that they're in the back seat. But when the child falls asleep, sometimes our brains can go into this autopilot. And so I wanted to remove some of the judgment that like a good person wouldn't do this, or that, what's wrong with somebody that they would let something like this happen when sadly the baby was behind the passengers, not behind the driver's seat. And when Tracy got home, she got out the car, went into the house. I think she played with the dogs, like, she did all these, but she forgot. She forgot, and she'll have to live with that for the rest of her life. Um, and it sounds like Kayla was not happy with just her response. Um it had been more than 3 hours once the grandson came over and they realized, "Oh, no, she's in the, she's in the car." And so, it's a hard one. I thank y'all for being here. Um Let me know in the comments on the regular video if there are any cases, any things that you all would like for me to cover. I am watching the Alexander brothers, their pretrial stuff. Like I said, I'm just careful. Like I've done a lot of the just ugh. So I like if there's a psychology topic that we can talk about, if there's a way that we can talk about protecting children. I've talked about teachers and how we can protect children, making sure that no teacher should ever have my child Snapchat. I did a video talking about TikTok, and TikTok was back. TikTok was down for like 10 hours or something, depending on your. But yeah, so the whole fear and all that over TikTok being gone it is what it is. And it's hard. Um, all right. Yes, and was he found, I was he found guilty? So let me look up his verdict. Because so I covered there was a psychologist that his testimony was not allowed in the case. Um, oh, so he's already been sentenced. Whoa. Okay, so he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Wow. All right. Yeah. It was a heinous, vicious thing. I am glad that he was found guilty, and I 100% agree with that, with that verdict. And if you stay away from TikTok, that's fine. You will find me on there. I make fun of not doing my notes. I sometimes share educational stuff. I don't really do the court stuff over there. And so if you're happy here, stay here. If you want to check me out on Instagram and TikTok, those are my other platforms that I'm active on. I'm on X, but I don't know what I'm doing. So, like, I don't like, I'm technically there, but not really. So, it's a whole thing. Jury took 45 minutes because he admitted that he did it. So, the only question was, "Do you think that it was an act of passion?" And the answer was no. No, like, so he admitted that he did it, but he said it was a crime of passion, and maybe he didn't say self-defense, but it sounded like he was like, "She came at me with a wine bottle," and nobody believed it. So, thankfully, the jury was not fooled, and so there was no defense. He was going to try to say I think he was gonna try to talk his way out of from murder to manslaughter by saying that he couldn't have formed premeditation. That's what the one doctor that they didn't allow in, but, I think the defense submitted that late. I think the sorry, I hit the mic. I think the judge made the right decision with that one, and so, yes. It reminded me of Ali Abulaban trying to say crime of passion. Like, no, sir. No, that was premeditated. No, no, no. So, oh, okay, so I'll have to go back and watch his sentencing. I don't think I'll cover it, but I will go and check it out. Yes. The jury rejected the manslaughter charge. Exactly, because it was definitely murder. I will take a look at this one and we will see. Because when I watch it or when I look at it, there just has to be something that like, let's talk about it. This is the thing that we will talk about and cover. I appreciate you all. I will see y'all next time. Y'all know I gotta go feed the kiddo. I will see y'all on Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. I hope y'all have